technological discontinuities and industrial dynamics. This presentation will cover one article discussed in this course, which deals with several different aspects of technological change and how it affects established companies. And the paper is written by Mary Tripsas in 1997, and it deals with the typesetter industry. So typesetter on this image here is an expensive piece of equipment which is used to create what goes into the printing of a newspaper. So if you have text that is then going to end up on a sheet of paper, you need a typesetter to input the text into a format where it can actually be printed in a printing process. So in this article by Mary Tripsas, she looks at how each technological discontinuity, there were several of those sweeping through the industry, but how they affected the investments of established firms. So their incentives to invest in the new technology and the investments that they had made, and how they affected their technical capabilities in terms of the R&D skills of the companies, and how they affected the specialized complementary assets. So a specialized complementary asset here is a non-technical asset which is specific for the purpose of a typesetter in this case. We'll see it more in detail here when we look at the study. So there were 4 different technologies here. Hot metal is the first one. The second one is analog typesetters, and then are digital ones, and laser as the last one. So you have waves here of creative destruction going back to the mid 20th century, and the analog, the hot metal ones were established in the late 19th century, but those waves then sweep through the industry, and each of those affect the established companies in various ways. So first of all of these shifts were competence destroying, in the sense that established R&D capabilities among those firms that were dominant lost its value. And you can imagine that quite naturally, how the ability to develop one of those devices for hot metal would be very different from the capabilities required to do it in an analog or a digital way, or laser for that matter. Now, there used to be 3 companies together controlling 99% of the market. Those were Linotype, Intertype, and Monotype. And there were also 3 different forms of complementary assets in this industry. So one was up to the left, the access to specialized machinery and equipment that is required to make those typesetters. So it's manufacturing engineering equipment. And the second one is the sales network. And the third one is a large and established library of fonts. Let's go through each one of those in a bit of detail. Specialized manufacturing. And there's a quote here from Tripsas' paper which goes, "In the matrix department are 154 machine tools which are necessary for the many operations in the production of linotype matrices. During the last 30 years, 90% of the machines and attachments have been redesigned and specially built in our own tool room." Now you can imagine that if this asset retains its value, and you see those very specific investments, you can also see how that is going to provide Linotype with a competitive edge and a shelter against technological change. Number 2, sales and services networks. Now, this value, the value of sales and services networks decreased in one of those waves of creative destruction, and it was when a new customer segment, the in-house publisher, emerged. So that then implied that you had less of a need for the established service network, and in that case the sales network lost its value, some of its value. Third, the font library. The font library was an incredibly important part of what those businesses offered. And if you think of it as you are a newspaper and you have a certain font that is distinct for your own image, this is a very important source of who you are. And if you have 1,000 or 5,000 different fonts that you offer, that is going to give you a very clear edge. Let's look at the results now. So what we have now in this table to the left, technological generation, you have analog photo typesetters, digital CRT, and then laser image setters. And then in the first column with numbers, you have incumbent machines and the performance of those machines compared to new entrant machines. So let's look at each of those generations. And the next table, you have whether there were incentives for incumbents to invest or not, and whether they invested or not. That is the first column. You can see that it's all yes there. And then the next one goes technological competence destroyed, and is the incumbent technical performance inferior? And then you have yes on all those as an answer. Specialized complementary assets devalued, and then you see number of entrants and their market share. So in the first table, look at the red box and you see how the incumbent machines are performing substantially worse than the new entrant machines. And an important reason for that is then competence destruction. However, what you see is that the number of new entrants in this first shift is 17, and they gain 89% of the market. So they virtually wipe out the established companies. If we look at the next shift, and the reason for that then is that the specialized complementary assets were devalued, which is the sales and services network has lost its value in this transition. You take a look at the next shift from analog photo typesetters to digital typesetters. And you see again how the incumbent machines perform worse, much worse than the new entrant machines. However, in this case, you have 14 new entrants, but they only grab 16% of the market. And an important reason for that is that the specialized complementary assets were not devalued. The established firms had their sales and services networks, their manufacturing engineering, and the font libraries, which sheltered them from the forces of creative destruction. And then the last case, when you have a transition from digital CRT to laser image setters, again, incumbent machines underperform the new entrant machines. And also in this case, you see 8 new entrants, but they only grab 12% market share for the same reason as in the previous shift. So if we sum up here, radical technological change needs to be analyzed along several dimensions. The typesetter industry shows how firms may be protected from creative destruction by controlling non-technical assets. And generally, this is a good paper because it balances and addresses technological change not only looking at one parameter, but rather how different parameters together combine to determine what happens in a technological transition.